Welcome back to Hemp Forward. In this session, we're talking about marketing forward, problems, predictions, and solutions in the hemp industry. As farmers, many of us might be on the sidelines right now. We're wondering if we grow this crop, will there be somebody to buy it? So the supply chain becomes very important, and retailers may be asking the same thing. If I have a market for this, do I have farmers who are willing to grow it? Return on investment is also important. There are many challenges as we think about the supply chain. And so to help me talk about that topic are Adrian Zelski and Alexandra Rodriguez. They're both with the Center Pivot Group. Thank you both for joining me here in this session.
Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, great to be here.
So let's talk about the supply chain for just a moment. Certainly farmers are concerned about that. So do you feel right now that there is a sustainable market on the other end for these farmers that are willing to grow hemp?
I want to be very honest here, and most of our farmers from last year still have product from last year, so I got to be, as blunt as I can. There wasn't really a sustainable market for probably 70 to 80% of the farmers last year. In the year 2019, the first year of the legal hemp industry, a lot of excitement, a lot of new states came online, hearing the numbers of $10,000 to $20,000 an acre profit. So people jumped in with a lot of enthusiasm and hopes of really hitting things called the green rush. And the reality was the FDA and the USDA moved much slower than the production. So without guidance from the FDA and from the USDA, and in fact, some prohibitive measures by the FDA to start, a lot of bigger companies that were looking to get a supply chain of CBD into their products really just pressed the pause button. And then you add COVID-19 onto it, and it really just kind of brought about a glut. A lot of people call it that, a glut in the industry of hemp. And so this year you saw, instead of an expansion that continued to move forward, you saw people retract a little bit, especially in the larger states that have been growing: Oregon, Colorado, and Kentucky. And now California, New York, Michigan, these other large agricultural states that have very good hemp growing climates, they were going to really go for it, but there was not a sustainable path. And so people really retracted and said, hey, I'm going to wait back until the FDA gives guidance, the USDA gives guidance, and that there's a path where we can know that there's a buyer before we put the plant in the ground. And that's the law of farming, So I really think that there's going to be a sustainable path. But today, there needs to be a lot of problems fixed and a lot of solutions developed.
So as we think about this overall supply chain, is the demand there for the product we're growing? Is it just getting that linkage built between it? And then you mentioned the regulation as well is certainly part of this as well.
I think just to bring more of a positive light into the potentials, because there definitely was some sort of a market in 2019, and we see it growing still as COVID-19 has brought the health and wellness category up to light to a lot of people. I mean, it's growing for sure because people are just more invested in their health now for very serious reasons. And I think hemp has a category there to fit into. And especially, I think it's important for farmers to know what they're producing, whether it's more industrial hemp for fiber, which is getting to that point. It's all been CBD that is stored right now. And so you have to look at what market you're targeting for finding that end market. And right now, the FDA isn't fully regulating the cosmetics industry, for example. So we've seen a lot of movement in brands that we've worked with that are in more skincare categories or not technically categorized as a supplement, a health supplement. It's more like lotions and muscle rubs and things like that. So that's where we see some movement. And that's where I see a lot of the marketplace really developing for farmers to find those end market contracts.
Yes. Yeah. And the exciting part is, we've talked to a lot of procurement officers of these large scale companies. I'm not going to name them but some of the people that supply the biggest distribution of food and beverage and cosmetics and medicines in the country. And one of their biggest feedbacks from their customers is we want something with CBD in it, or we want something that has the cannabinoid that they've heard about is going to really help them with what their conditions might be. So a lot of people want it. And in fact, one company that has over 200 subsidiary companies that everyone would know if I said it, they have basically gotten research back every time that that's their number one request in their new products. So they're waiting for FDA guidance, they're waiting for farmers to have, standard operating procedures and good agricultural practices and good agricultural collection practices and everything that can bring a supply chain where these large-scale companies can jump in. But the one company that we were talking about, if they were on board, there wasn't enough hemp grown in the United States for that one company. So, you look at those type realities. So there's a dam that's built up. There's excitement, there's leaks going through the dam, but that dam's going to have to break with regulatory practices and a lot of science and a lot of data and a lot of proof of concept that the CBD is going to be safe, it's going to be delivered in a predictable dosage, and that the products will be able to really put them on the shelves with consistency.
So if I'm a farmer out here and I'm interested in growing hemp, then how do I begin to make sure that I have that supply chain out there? Because it sounds like there's demand there, there's some regulatory problems and hurdles, but I'm still interested. So how do I begin to leap those challenges to put this whole chain together, so to speak?
Right. One thing that we saw in the industry, the behemoths, the big ones that really invested heavily, they had a concept of vertical integration, which in the long run is a very exciting process for any agricultural industry to have seed, farms, extraction, product development, all the way to, the shelves. And that model really blew up in the hemp industry this year because people invested heavily in that. And, if one link of the chain failed, it kind of brought down the whole thing. So a lot of the large scale companies that had big contracts didn't live up to their contracts. They let down their farmers, or, they went into bankruptcy before they could even get it to product. So what we're kind of working on with Center Pivot Group is an idea called virtual integration, which is more about each section of the supply chain being independent, but virtually tied together. So essentially you can start to develop these programs together, you can get SOPs together, you can get something that's predictable so that these large scale companies start buying. So you're hoping as a farmer in the end to say, hey, I'm gonna do 100 acres and I'm gonna farm it this way, I'm gonna extract it this way, and it's gonna go into this product. And that's what Center Pivot Group and High Grade are kind of teaming up to do, is to build that virtual integration rather than put too much weight on the whole process. Try to work with good partners all around the country to really develop those systems so that we can trust that. And then these customers for 2021 especially can really come in and say, I do want to put a product line out. I do want to create a CBD line of my new, shampoo or my chocolate bar or anything like that. So.
I think another point too is Center Pivot Group is really about matchmaking and taking each region case by case, because every farmer deals with a different climate, right? So at Center Pivot Group, we're really working with farmers on an individual basis and really trying to connect them with regionalized economies, whether it's extractors, processing facilities, and then pairing them with end market buyers that are looking to source from those areas, whether it's SoCal region, NorCal, East Coast. We're working with some wonderful farmers in New York and the Hudson Valley, South Carolina. So again, it's that regionalized thinking that I think Center Pivot Group is able to make a big impact as well, and help the supply chain kind of not get stuck at one point in the supply chain, but keep it seamless.
Sure. I'm interested in your two thoughts on this. Many farmers have grown row crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, these types of things. And we tend to grow those as a commodity. To me, what I'm hearing though with hemp, that perhaps it's more specialized and that I'm going to have a particular end user that I'm growing for. Am I right in that I'm going to have, that perhaps I need to think about hemp a little bit differently than other crops I've grown? Or how do you feel this supply chain is coming together right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be up to the consumer. A lot of our philosophies come from consumer backwards. We're going to do a lot of, seeing what the market says and what the buyers say, but in the end, I think it will be a commodity. We have commodity partners as advisors for our company, and they spec'd the market very deeply last year and saw that it was going to be a large-scale ingredient, and they saw that it was going to be used in so many different things, from nutritional supplements to dietary supplements to medicine to lotions and soaps and everything in between, and they're excited about it. But until it's sophisticated, it's a very much a fringe crop that doesn't really have a standardization or a best practices method to get there. So these commodities people are in line to make it happen as soon as they can see it as real. So I think there's a bridge from boutique to commoditization that's going to happen. But I think the boutique market will always be there. I think it will always be something, if you do develop a relationship with a company and they say, hey, all we need is 100 acres and we need it grown this way and extracted this way, that's the best case scenario. But in the long run, you're going to have large scale companies. It's, in fact, Unilever last week signed with Neptune Wellness out of Canada, and they're going to need probably around, I think it was guesstimated between $60 and $160 million worth of oil done in a standardization way so they can start putting in their products. and I don't know if I can say Unilever, but they have a press release about it. They put it out. And so, that's a good sign for the industry. That if those ingredient companies and those large scale food, supply chain companies get involved, then yes, we're going to need to do it as a commodity. But until then, it's going to be a little bit boutique.
Yeah, I mean, we've met with quite a few ingredient sourcing companies and gone through the whole due diligence process with them, and worked with our farms and different farmers, and kind of seen the bottlenecks being just the FDA regulations. So I really think like as soon as those come out, everything's gonna roll. And I think being prepared and being experienced leading up to that is really beneficial to farmers wanting to get involved, who have coverage for sunk cost and different resources that are needed to start that grow process.
Good point. And that's probably real. It's like, it's smart to start boutique in case that's where it stays, or in case that's where you find your, comfort zone, and that's good. But then thinking, because a lot of big scale farmers do that. They're like, hey, if I figure out how to do 100 acres, I have thousands of acres. If I need to scale up, I can, but I don't want to take too much of a risk and put things into a dangerous, financial situation, or over investing in equipment, or different things that can really put a farmer in a stress situation. I think the best thing you can do is take metered steps, look at the market where it is today, because it's boutique, but in the long run, it's definitely gonna be a commodity.
That's where I wanted to go then. Certainly, and a lot of industries start this way. We start small and we begin to get bigger. So is hemp ready then for big agriculture, do you think? And we begin to farm more acres?
I mean, I work with a farmer in California that does 10,000 acres, and he's like, he says it very funnily, I won't use his words, but he's like, any blank can grow this, and I just want to know that there's a sale. And essentially he's like, I've got 6,000 acres I rotate and need to change every year, and would like to add it into my rotation. He just needs to know that there's a sale. So in essence, I think once it is a commodity, you're going to have people like that come in, and it's going to be something that's an ingredient, and that's he would say that as well. He'd say it's, in the end, it's an ingredient. Hemp looks like a plant, and it's something that's really multifaceted, but right now it's something you harvest properly and you extract into oil. You're farming oil, and then that becomes into a finished product. And so once that is all, set up for products, we're going to have a really fluid system to do commoditization for sure.
You've both mentioned Center Pivot Group and explained a little bit, but how do farmers fit in with Center Pivot Group? You've alluded to that, but I'd like to make sure that they understand.
Well, I mean, I touched on it a little bit earlier. So what we're really looking to do, as Adrian has kind of introduced the whole concept of virtual integration rather than vertical, we're really trying to specialize each project with each farmer and cater to their needs, right? We're working with them on SOPs. Norm, one of our farm partner program managers, is going to be working with a lot of California farm partners on specifics like SOPs and soil amendments and different resources. And Center Pivot Group is our team, and myself and a few others are going to be working on end market pairing. So we're really in the middle of the mine. We're really looking at the end and the other end of the tunnel and connecting the farmer with the end market buyer. So we've just seen, I worked with Adrian at High Grade Hemp as well, and that was seeing everything firsthand. That's the biggest problem, and Center Pivot Group is working on those solutions. The biggest problem being the farmer doesn't have anywhere to sell the product. Now they have the experience, they've grown it, they have a year or two under their belts, which is great, but now we want to help source all of that, and that's what we're actively working on right now. So
and from the high grade perspective, we have the advantage of relationships. We've seen the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything about this industry, and by sticking with them and not just selling seed and saying, good luck, we've been able to develop relationships where we're like, okay, how did things go? What was good? What was wrong? And what do you still have? How can we help you sell it? So it's a relationship industry really for us now. I think Center Pivot Group is looking to develop, strong bonds, strong relationships so we can trust each other and learn from each other and excel together in ways that I don't think you can do if you're just cold calling someone or hoping that this farmer is going to do it right. You have to go through the mechanisms together. You have to learn what the strengths and weaknesses of both the farmer and Center Pivot Group are, so that we can work together to kind of figure out what's going to work.
And another point really quickly is international distribution.
Yeah.
That's one thing we've been really focusing on and have actively seen success in some supplier deals overseas as well. So that market in Europe is really keen on smokable flower right now, for example.
Yeah.
So
Really fascinating.
it's interesting, but we're constantly reading the market, and
Yep.
Center Pivot Group is working on that as well. For
Yeah, and Center Pivot Group tries to look
opportunities.
at that as well, like what's working now, what's going to work down the long run. And right now, a hemp cigarette alternative is very popular in Switzerland per se, and France and Italy. So we're finding markets for farmers there. And then you run into another challenge there, though, when you find out that, you know, for European distribution, everything has to be GACP, which is good agricultural and collection processes, not just not GAP, you know. So, and then we go back to the farmer and say, hey, are you GACP, or can we help you get that process started so that we can work that contract for next year? So there's a lot of just learning. It's a lot of regulatory, you know, bureaucratic type stuff that we have to work through to make sure that the market expands, not just from, you know, the CBD tincture market, which really started the whole thing, into more, you know, multi-use around the world type markets. Yeah.
So this session is problems, predictions, and solutions. We've talked a lot of
Yep.
problems and solutions, and you've alluded to some predictions, but give me your prediction. Where are we headed in supply chain? I'll give both of you an opportunity to talk about this here. Where do you see us in a year or two as far as the supply chain? What's the prediction, if you will?
The prediction on the optimistic level, which I think is important for this industry, especially in this time, because so much unrest and just, you know, really just dissociated relationships with farmers and you know, trying to figure out how to make the American farmer real, you know, solid, you know, enterprise again. CBD, you know, everyone was so excited in 2019, and 2020 just hit like a brick. I think to look at FDA and really, you know, talk to those people in the FDA, they want to have guidance. When you talk to them, they're like, we want to understand this, but we also have to know that it's not going to cause any problems down the road. So they have to do a lot of research. So I think as far as the prediction's concerned, as long as the FDA is comfortable with the process of how this is rolling out, and that they get their trials in and they get their tests and they can give some guidance in 2021, I think it's going to be a massive crop from that day forward. And, you know, CBD is going to be piercing the veil. A lot of people, because of CBD's problems, are now starting to look at grain and fiber and fuel and proteins and stuff like that as the next round for hemp. So, you know, that's going to come right down the line. High-grade hemp seed, you know, our genetics company is working on tri-crops and dual crops. I think it's going to be really important to try to start working on those. Those are crops that have multi-use. They have, you know, CBD in them, but they also have seed for nutrients, and then they also have fiber and for stock in the herd. So you can see that the optimism should be there, but I don't want to also overpromise, underdeliver. So the prediction would be, we're very excited. We think we're going to win the Super Bowl next year, but at least we're going to get in the playoffs. You know, I would say there's an analogy. And I think if you get to the point of, you know, knowing that you're learning your systems and you're developing these, you know, processes for the future, I think it's very optimistic.
Alexandra, predictions?
Yeah, I'll be short and sweet, but really, I think in 2021, FDA regulations are going to surface on some level. I think from there, you'll see more farmers actively growing more acreage of hemp. And I think, again, with the tri-crop breeding happening right now, I know that our geneticists at High Grade are working really hard on the tri-crop. I see a lot of areas like you're from Missouri. You work on a cattle ranch. We were talking earlier how a lot of farmers are primed to farm and harvest industrial hemp for fiber. I've worked in the past on fiber textiles, and that's really how I got into the industry and started working on CBD brands, and therefore later in the seed world. But I've been talking with a wonderful woman, Rebecca Burgess from Fibershed. For smaller scale farmers, it's a great introduction to farming for textiles, whether it's organic cotton, learning more about getting into the textile space. I see hemp really picking up in that category in 2021.
Yep.
So we've heard about Center Pivot Group, but tell me more about what that is.
Yeah, so Center Pivot Group developed out of my role with High Grade Hemp Seed, which is I'm Chief Business Development Officer. And when I was going around to farmers in February and March saying, hey, do you want seed again? And they're like, I still have 500,000 pounds of last year. So, you know, I came back to the executive team at High Grade and said, you know, guys, I don't think we're going to sell much seed unless there's a solution on the back end. And I would like to kind of spend my time over the next 6 to 8 months, so we're ready for the fall for our farmers to start looking for sales and solutions for them. So CPG really became a relationship company, like she was saying, a matchmaking company that went back into our, you know, networks and said, hey, you're going to have how many pounds this year? And it's going to be, you know, what is your end cost? What do you need? Learn the science and do a virtual relationship where we can say, okay, we're going to help high grade farmers get to the end result of sales. So Center Pivot Group was developed out of that. And since that time, we've learned about, you know, the science that's needed to accomplish that, the R&D that's needed to accomplish that, the regulatory stuff, the SOPs, the, you know, GAP standards, the, you know, everything that you need to get
Vendor agreements.
Yeah, exactly, and get ready to start selling to large scale buyers. And our goal with Center Pivot Group is to develop that sophisticated system so that we can attack those clients and say, look, we're going to be able to provide CBD at a high level to you, and CBG and CBN, when all these other cannabinoids come in, we want to be ready to help the farmer get that sale done. And by doing so, CPG becomes Center Pivot Group, you know, AKA CPG, becomes a solution. You know, it's solving a problem that's probably, in our opinion, one of the biggest in the industry.
So tell me then, how do we help stabilize the supply chain for farmers?
You know, half of it is awareness, which is education. So working with groups like Farm Journal and you know, large, you know, established, you know, major players in the farming and agriculture industry to educate and make aware that companies like Unilever, you know, we've heard whispers from Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Swiss American, which is the formulator for Johnson & Johnson, you know, PepsiCo, and everyone under the sun is looking to put CBD in their products and looking to get this addition in there. So one of the biggest things is really making sure that we're not just trying to make a quick buck, and we're not trying to look at farming as a way to just make money off of hemp real quickly. It's saying, how can we work with the already established industries? There's just been an 83-year prohibition on hemp. The systems are already there. If you integrate hemp into the very well-oiled machine of agriculture and promotion and education and awareness of agriculture, I think it's going to be a pretty, you know, seamless process. You know, so really this is an important discussion with Farm Journal and really finding all the validated players and the people that are working in a really intelligent, sophisticated way to make this work, and then uniting on that, you know, because in the end, no one should be competing with each other right now. There's a huge open landscape, and farmers, extractors, product companies are all trying to make this work. So the more we can all integrate and work with the platforms that are out there, I think that's the key for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the solution would be working with not only experienced players, but people who are truly in agriculture to farm and not in it to be a part of the green rush, and they're in it for the long haul, because that's what Center Pivot is about. We're partnering with a lot of amazing farmers who we want to have a long-term relationship with.
Yep, and even machine companies, John Deere, you know, there's a branch of a really large company called Hemp Processing Solutions. He's going to be on this later today.
Netafim.
Yeah, Netafim, and all the different large agricultural people that are getting involved. There's nutrient companies, you know, pesticide companies, everybody who's doing the best they can for agriculture, and then integrating their involvement in hemp to make sure that we're doing this in a level that's going to make, you know, the farmers succeed and the product companies buy. That's really the key to all of it.
Adrian, Alexandra, thank you very much. Talking market trends, sustainability, supply chain. Appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's
Good
an
to be
honor.
with you.
Yep. Thank you all.
And stay with us here on Hemp Forward as we talk in our next section about seed to shelf success stories from the farm.